do things that don't scale. Like even when I first put out music on SoundCloud, if someone liked my song, I would message them and thank them. Like when you have no following, you've got to do anything you can. And so yeah, still I'm like, let's do things that don't scale, because every day I want to know that I have some progress in this. And that's also just like a personal thing where I want to know that every day I'm doing something to help it grow.
Episode 26 of Invest in Music with Lyrah. Here we're going to talk about her background as a product designer and her career as an artist. We cover a lot of stuff from her background working at Meta to starting on sound and launching a bunch of interesting experiments along the way. As a reminder, you can click this episode on investinmusic.xyz. It's the best way to support our guests, so without further ado, let's get into it. Episode 26 with Lyrah. All right, we are back. We've got Kathleen, aka Lyrah, in the building. How are we feeling today?
Feeling good.
Thank you for being here. You know, it's going to be quite a fun episode. I want to talk a lot about your background. You have quite an extensive one, and you've been seeing a lot of success recently as an artist, which has been amazing to watch. But for people who don't know, why don't you give us a little background on yourself?
Okay, yeah. I think the biggest piece is that I was a product designer, and now I'm retired and full-time on music. So I had done product design for 10 years, counting in college. And I worked at companies like Gumroad, Omni, and Facebook. So Facebook, well, now Meta, that was the one I was at the longest for 5 years. And then I quit February 2022. And then it's been full-time music. So about 1.5 years of music full-time.
I feel like that's right when we met. I remember it was like spring break and you were like just on the edge of quitting, or you had like just quit maybe like 3 or 4 weeks prior to that. How was that transition for you? Like, did it feel scary going from like a full-time thing company to full-time music, or what was that transition like? Yeah,
it took a while. It was weird because I actually wanted to quit in 2020 because I had first put out, so while I was at Facebook, I made the project Lyrah, as in I was always making music for other people, and I wanted to then put out my own music. And I had one song that did pretty well. It's called Down Low, and it got playlisted. I didn't even know that was possible. Got on Fresh Finds, and then that was the first time that I really saw anybody beyond my friends and family listen to my music. And I thought, okay, I should give this a full shot, save up money, and give myself runway, which is a very tech way of looking at it, but runway so that I can pursue this and see how far I can push it. So I was planning to quit in 2020. Then the pandemic happened, and I actually thought it would be easier to do remote and making music, but I made less music. Like weirdly, by commuting into the office from San Francisco to, East Palo Alto, where the office is located, I made more music in that time, even though the commute was, about an hour each way.
It's fascinating because I know that your roots of music actually started basically since you were super, super young. I would love for you to talk more about just like your relationship with music as a whole, and then maybe how that turned into you joining kind of the corporate world and Facebook and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. So going all the way back, which quick check, is the arrow okay? Yeah. Okay. So going all the way back, started piano when I was 3, and it's hard for me to remember how much of it was me wanting to do music versus my parents encouraging me to do it. But yeah, no piano teacher wanted to take me on. So my dad had to convince this teacher to do like father-daughter lessons. So we did them together. And then I surpassed my dad. And then he just focused on making me a better piano player. And so piano was the first instrument. And then I was always singing and found a vocal coach. I think it was around when I was 12. Which I'm from a small town, so I guess should give that background. I'm from a town outside of Pittsburgh called Johnstown, and there weren't many vocal coaches in my area. So the one that I found, she taught opera. So that was what I studied. And then, so in that time period, this is like middle school, I was singing at anything I could, church, nursing homes, it's like funerals, weddings. My parents would always make me perform. We'd be at a restaurant and they'd be like, all right, Kathleen, get up and give us a song, which I have to like unwire this piece of my brain so I can like figure out a way to enjoy performance more than making it for somebody else. Like I want it to be for other people, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's a different relationship.
Were you just like full on just doing a song in the middle of a restaurant on like a Wednesday night?
Yes, it was so embarrassing. And a cappella.
No way.
And
did,
opera.
Did generally everyone at the restaurant stop to listen to you having this like moment?
They're like, who is this little girl that's going to sing for us? And everyone was always really nice, but I was always so embarrassed. Like, sorry for interrupting your dinner for this song of Puccini. Yeah.
Well, it seems like they had a higher plan for you then, if they were getting you to perform in the public
they were
restaurants.
Always very supportive. Yeah. And then during summers, I went to this camp called Interlaken, which AOK made a joke about that in our thread, because he's from Michigan, and so he knew of this camp. That was like spent the summers there practicing voice. It's like the intensive place you want to go if you want to do music full time, but more so in like a classical way. Like if you want to be a opera singer or in musical theater, like a lot of people go on to perform in Broadway that go there. So that was the childhood. But then I hit a point where I couldn't sing what was on the radio. Like my voice could only sing in this operatic way where it was very resonant. So it was all like, like very much here. And it was terrible because I'm like, I just want to sing what's on the radio, but I couldn't sing in like a normal way, like sing-songy. So I had to relearn how to sing and root it in my talking voice, less than this like operatic switching into vocal mode. Right. It was frustrating because like I'm a teen and I just wanted to sing the songs that I liked and I couldn't. And so found a different vocal coach, and like I had to kind of unlearn how to sing in an operatic way. Like I can still do it, but now it's completely different when I tap into it versus like what feels like my voice. But I will say I do wonder if my natural voice is my natural voice because I had to relearn what that was.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And what age were you when you started to like relearn how to sing?
That would have been more in high school. So more around, what age are you as a freshman? Is that 16?
Probably like, 15, 16.
Yeah.
And at this point in time, did you have an identity as like an artist, quote unquote, or as a music person, or is this more of like a hobby on the side that you kind of just kept to yourself?
Definitely beyond a hobby or passion. It's like every day after school, that was what I did, and anything that I could sing at, I would. In high school, I did a lot of musical theater, and even like joined the production of a local community college and doing it there. So it's just like anything I could do, I would do it because I thought one day I would do music full time. I never thought about it as an artist. I always thought like maybe with a symphony if I'm doing more classical singing, or I loved musical theater, so I thought maybe that would be it. But then also with that, it's like I took dance lessons, so modern jazz, tap, and ballet. So yeah, it was like, I was, I think always driven to figure it out, but then I was also realistic, and I was like, I don't know that I can make this work. Yeah. And I had really good grades, and I got a scholarship to Penn State, and then that was when it switched, and I was like, well, I guess I'll do a real job. Yeah.
That's so funny. I didn't know that you went to Penn State because all of my high school friends went to Penn State.
Oh, really?
And my reputation associated with Penn State is it's a very like frat and sorority driven culture. Did you get kind of sucked into that world when you went to Penn State?
No, I was in the honors college, so I was like a nerd at Penn State.
Which was a really great honors college, I might say. Yeah. Like I know that everyone that was there spoke very highly of it. So that's very interesting to hear that your experience was a lot more academic there.
Yeah. But then I later learned how to enjoy that. Right. And the reason I went there was because I was from a small town, and I just wanted that big college experience. Like there's kind of a charm of being from a small town where you walk in a grocery store and you know someone there. Like you're bound to run into someone that you know anywhere that you go. But then you get sick of that. So I just wanted to be somewhere where I wouldn't know anyone or really as many people. Like some people from my town still went there. But yeah, so I did my freshman year. I was a bio major because I thought, I guess I'll become a doctor. And I was quite bad at it. And it's weird because I was good at school in high school, but I was getting like C's and B's in my bio classes. It didn't click for me. And so because I was in the honors college, I had to maintain a 3.75. So I was like, well, realistically, I can't do this because I'm going to get kicked out and then I'm going to lose my scholarship. So I have to switch majors. And it was around that time that I got into tech, more so accidentally. Like the thing that started it was actually music related. I was meeting a bunch of people at Penn State that made music, and then I'd see all these empty venues, and I was like, I want to make something that connects all the venues with all these artists so that people have a place to perform. And I didn't know how to make anything around that. And so I took a very academic approach to it. And like I had a notebook where I'm writing down the definitions of HTML and CSS. And I'm like, yes, this is like the studious way to learn how to build products. And, I like made business cards because I'm like, that's how you make it a real thing. Yep. Like there was no site existed, but I thought it was important to make business cards. And it was through that, though, that I met a bunch of other students working on things. And then I was like, I'll help you in any way you need because I just want to learn. And so I was doing marketing for people because that was the easiest thing to just jump into. And so I was in all these huge bio classes of, hundreds of people. And then I would spam the listservs with like whatever the products were that people were trying to build. People did not like that, but I was like, we're learning, we're flying. And so, was just going with it and trying to learn as much as I could. And then there was a group of students that they wanted me to help out with marketing and move out to California for the summer. And I was like, I've never been to California. And so that was the first thing. And so I was doing marketing at that time, but then it was through being in the Bay Area that I actually saw how products were built. And so this was the summer after my freshman year. And then it was through that I wanted to be the one making the product. And I thought that meant engineering. So I went back to college. Like I had taken that summer off and then the next semester. And my parents were very mad at me. So it made sense to go back to college. And I switched my major to advertising because I was like, let me just find the easiest major possible to free up my time to learn other things. And so was learning front end, but then I kept gravitating towards the design side. And then I started hackathons at my college and I'd go to all the hackathons around me. So it was like a very nerdy,
I love that
college experience. And then once I got better at design, I started teaching design classes at Penn State. And that actually made me even better at design. Right. Just through teaching other people and like really having to understand it. And this was Photoshop back then. And so at the same time though, I was getting more into dance music. So it's like had advertising as a major, freed up a lot of my time, would hop on doing design for anyone that needed it. And looking back, like the design was not great, but it was a starting place. And then I think this was in my sophomore year, so it must have been around this same time. I had a friend that connected me with Axtone. So you've got Swedish House Mafia, Axwell has a label, Axtone, and they needed vocalists to do top lines. And so they would send me demos and then I'd write on top of it, send it back. Looking back, like the vocal processing was terrible and non-existent. The writing was not good. But it was great practice. Right. And because it was weird, I was so used to, which I guess I left this out, but I was always making music. Like I'd make a lot of heavy cinematic music at my piano and then also just like more singer-songwritery stuff. Like always leaning more indie than like folk or country, because singer-songwriter is kind of a vast spectrum. But yeah, so that was the first time that people would give me tracks and I had to figure out how to write a top line on top of it, which sometimes that can be harder than just starting a song from scratch. Yeah. Like, I actually think the easiest way to write vocals is when it is just the chords. It can be harder when there are all the other instruments in it, because you're like, you've got just a more narrow space to play with. But yeah, so it helped me at that time, because I would then look at other music that I liked, like Dead Mouse, other Swedish House Mafia songs, and really try to dissect it and be like, why is this working? Like, why do I love this? I very much felt the gap, and that I wasn't making things at that level, but I wanted to so badly. But it was a start. Yeah. And so that was what first got me into dance music. And like, no amazing cuts came out of it. To be honest, I don't know if anything's still online. But I worked with other people in college at that point doing top lines for them, because then it was just like, yeah, anything that I can do, I wanted to do.
And what brought you back out to San Francisco? You were there your freshman summer, basically, which, by the way, is crazy to hear that you were even thinking about how products are built at that age, because I think most people freshman year of college are just thinking about how to like get drunk, not like how to like build products. You know what I mean? So I guess I'm curious to hear, like, you're doing this music, you're doing this dance project music, you're understanding you have an affinity for hackathons and building and whatnot. What brought you back out to San Francisco to really start that side of your career?
Yeah, so that was through internships. So then that following summer, I think it was that summer, either that one or the one after. I guess that would be the sophomore summer. I did a design internship for this app called Tiny Post, which I did it for free, and I had met the co-founders from the time that I was in the Bay Area before, from this accelerator called 500 Startups that we were in. And the one co-founder was a designer, and I was like, can I just learn from you and help you and be your intern for the summer? And so that was what brought me back out. And so that was in Palo Alto for that summer. And I'm trying to think, I did one more design internship, a company called Sincerely. Matt Brazina was the CEO of that. It sold to another company, which he had gone to Penn State, and he helped me a lot. So when I was starting hackathons, I wanted, people that actually knew what they were doing to come out and judge it. And so he helped me. He got me tapped in with the crew of like Justin Kahn, Steve Huffman. And so all these people came out to judge the hackathon, and then that helped it be a lot more successful. Yeah. More people from other colleges would bus in to be part of it. So yeah, that one was great. That was like my first real design internship where I was fully owning the stuff that I was designing, versus just like sitting next to somebody all day trying to figure out, well, okay, so quick design breakdown. When you first start with it, you just want to make things that are very flashy. And music can be kind of similar when people start out. And there was this site called Dribble where it's like the things on it are beautiful, but it's not always functional. So I remember there was like one time that I was working at that company, Tiny Post, and I think I spent a day trying to perfect a bow, of making a bow in Photoshop, because I'm like, this bow, it's going to look incredible on this page, but very much like missing the point of building products and just trying to make it successful. Right. Like that hadn't clicked yet. And so, yeah, when you start out with it, you just want to like prove to other people that you're good at it, versus like the more years you spend in it, you don't even care if other people think you're good at it. You just want it to be as successful as possible. And then that speaks for itself. Product design is a lot more about being an incredible product thinker and making it work than like a flashy designer. Right. Because after a while, it's like you work within a design system and there are only X number of ways to design a button or design the components within the design system. Yeah.
And is that what then led to you doing the work at Facebook and Meta? As you were working for these internships, working with these startups, then I'm sure at some point it went from being an internship to like a full-time design role at a company.
Yeah. So the first one was Gumroad. And looking back, like I still wasn't, senior by any means at design. And so when I got that job, this was the first real job out of college. And first, in finding what company I wanted to work at, I wanted something that was somewhat music related. So even Splice was another one that I was looking at that time. But with Gumroad, I really loved the product team. Sahil is the CEO of it. He was incredible. I joined because of this designer, Alex. And I was like, this is the person that I want to learn from and become like. And I like that it helped creators and musicians. And back then, no one said the creator economy. That was not a term that was used. This is 2014, or I guess the very end of 2014. And yeah, so with that job, I did. I think technically it was called UI UX because design went through a change where it was called UI UX. Now it's all just product design, but UI UX and front end. And I think front end helped me because I wasn't a good enough designer to just get a solid design gig. Right. And so it's like by doing front end, it landed me the role. I wasn't amazing at front end, but it helped. And so then after that, I was like, all right, I just want to be doing design. I don't want to do any more front end because it was also limiting in what you design. You're like, oh, fuck, whatever I design, I'm going to have to implement this. So you're like already thinking about that as you design it out. Yeah.
It's so fascinating because you're the first guest we've had on this podcast that has such a professional career that precedes like their like major artist career, you know? I feel like most people that we talk to on here, they're either like strong founder, like I'm building a product, or it's like strong artist, like I'm developing an artist project. What I find fascinating about your career is that you've had such a deep relationship with tech and building product that you're now channeling into your artist project. And I just feel like there's a lot of synergies there that lead to really amazing ways of thinking about how to, like, you mentioned like you have runway for your artist project and stuff like that.
Definitely, yeah.
Like how has that influenced your journey as an artist?
This is my product. I don't want to call it my product because it feels so much more than that. But it's also why I gave it an artist name, because I'm like, I want to be able to separate myself from the stuff that I make. And I guess to quickly just talk through that, when you're making things, it is very personal and different than design. Like design, I get zero personal creative fulfillment out of it, and I don't believe that you should, because it's not for you. Like you're not designing things to, you know, scratch this like creative side of you. It's like, no, that you're designing things just for these other people to make it as good and simple as possible for them. Whereas music, it's like, it's all about you. And then once you have whatever you've made, it goes through this filter of deciding now of what you've made, what do you want to give to other people? And how do you want that to be presented? And then how do you make it, I mean, as successful as possible, but like as listened to as possible, for it to resonate as much as possible. And so I find that it's very similar to product work. It's just a different way of approaching it. Right. Like for me, if this was a product, I think I would have cracked it even sooner. Yeah. But yeah, and very much, you know, like some startup things I've thought about, do things that don't scale. Like even when I first put out music, on SoundCloud, if someone liked my song, I would message them and thank them. Which sometimes people were like, this is a bot. I'm like, this is very much not a bot. But I, like, when you have no following, you've got to do anything you can. And so, yeah, still, I'm like, let's do things that don't scale, because every day I want to know that I have some progress in this. And that's also just like a personal thing where I want to know that every day I'm doing something to help it grow. Right. Yeah. Like I have spreadsheets, you know.
We love spreadsheets. I'm going to fast forward a little bit here because I think it's relevant to what you were just saying. I feel like one of the biggest moments for you when it came to like music tech was some of the first experiments that you did on Onchain. So before we go into like what those experiments were, I'd love for you to talk about your transition from being in like Facebook design world and kind of doing the artist project on the side to you then building this alias that was kind of like focused on not only music, but also like having a design or tech influence behind it.
Yeah. And to be honest, it wasn't a conscious decision of like wanting to have this music tech influence. It's just because I, you know, span the world of music and tech, it was just natural. And then as ideas popped up, I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going to spend 30 minutes and design this out and then tweet it out. Yeah. And yeah, so let me think, where do I start with that? Well, what was the first part of the question? Because I had one other idea I wanted to touch on. Yeah,
I think it's just like, did you have a conscious intention of creating these experiments when you first started to, you know, be more public on Twitter and start to develop a brand around Lyrah? Because these first times that you got on my radar was like, we had met in person, obviously, but you started to put out tweets that were like tech focused with the spin on music, and they were getting like really good engagement. And I guess my question would be like, did you consciously think about that as something that you wanted to like develop around your brand, or was it more just like, oh, I'm putting out music, I might as well build this cool like product iteration around it, you know?
Yeah, it was more so that. And I think the thing that I first did within that changed it for me. So I designed this product called the Record Deal Simulator. And this was something where a friend asked to connect me, and I was like, yeah, I'll just connect them with another designer. I'll take the call. But then when they told me what they wanted to build, I'm like, this is so cool. I have to do it. And so this was for the founders, Diuda, John Tanners, and Aaron. So the Create Save founders. And they were like, we've got this idea. We want to break down how record deals actually play out and how many streams you'd need to break even or even make, like $1 based on what your terms are. Because right now, so many artists are signing and they don't actually understand. Like if you ask them, how many streams would you need to break even? They can't tell you. Yeah. And so that idea alone, I was like, I'm sold. I want to be the one to design this for you. And so that was the first thing that I did within music tech, separate of Gumroad, because it was like for creators, but not with the, specific focus of only music. But with this one, it had such an incredible reaction around it, because people were using it to finally understand their deals, or people adjacent to music that don't really understand how deals work were finally understanding, just by running through the tool. And so it had a Twitter moment. I think this was November 2020. Yeah. And so seeing that, it was like, there should be more educational tools to help people understand music. And so just in general, like if I do see something where it either helps teach or like, either artists or other people in music understand what these things are, then it should be that way. Like the contract one was then another one, which if I hadn't done the record deal simulator, I probably wouldn't have thought of the contract one. And so that one, which we might have it on the screen.
I think we do. Michael, do you want to pull up the record deal simulator really quick? And what I found interesting about that is honestly just like looking at this, the framing of it was so interesting because you were basically like releasing the song and you were not only building this product around it, but you sort of had this tweet that kind of went viral in tandem with it. I mean, like, what do you want to tell about that story? Like, there's so many different pieces to unpack there. Like, which one of those felt the most profound to you as someone that put this intention into the world? Yeah.
Oh, actually, I think it's... maybe we'll just show the record deal simulator like overlaid so we can get that in, but we can show the contract one. Maybe it's this one. Okay, so with this, it was doing an NFT drop on Foundation. Sound didn't yet exist, otherwise I would have done it on Sound. Right. But this was actually shortly before Sound existed. So this was November 2021. And the reason that the reason that I even decided to do a drop, because I was reading everything that was happening with it, and I kept thinking like, oh, this is really cool, but I didn't think that I was the type of artist that would make sense for it, because I thought I'm not a big enough artist. But then, so with Create Safe, Diuda manages Grimes, and so there was a Grimes drop that I was helping with. And to be honest, it never even happened, but just by being part of that one, and really then having to understand it, then I was like, oh, I want to do one where I break apart the ownership of my song just for the pure experiment of it, because that to me was the most exciting part of NFTs. Like transparently not the money side of it, but how you can bring people into it. And so I wanted to give other people that feeling of owning a piece of my song and listening to it and knowing what it was like to listen to a song that you have a piece of. Right. And then, so with this, I wanted to make it clear in the splits of it, what you owned. And so I compared this to the experience of being on emails with other artists that are all completely well-intentioned, and this is just the way it goes, that when it comes to the legal side of it, it's expensive. So you either choose to hire a lawyer, maybe their hourly is somewhere between $300 to $500 for them to review this contract that relates to this song that you're going to be part of, and talking about this all separate of Web3. So either like you pay someone to review this, and so you start off at a loss, or you just try to review it yourself and you don't fully understand what you've signed. And it was always like, the collaboration side's so awesome and the legal side of it was so shitty because you don't understand it, and it didn't ever make sense for me to pay for a lawyer for a lot of those early ones, because it's like, well, I'm not even making money off of this. Like, what do I have to lose? And so because NFTs were a time to rethink it, I was like, okay, well, for the contract of this, if someone's going to buy a piece of the song, like, I want it to be as simple as possible for them to understand what this means. And so I just tweeted this out, and I was like, what if all music contracts were this simple and didn't require hiring a lawyer just to understand? And the reason that this did so well is because, half the people were like, you're not a lawyer. This is really stupid. This isn't a contract. And the other half of people were like, it should be this way. Yeah.
I feel like that's very representative of my experience with the music industry, which is to say that there's a very almost like academic school of the music industry, which is like, this is by the books. This is how this works. This is how these long form contracts should be. And I see so much merit in what the intention is there. But the reality is that most artists are not at that same level intellectually or academically, where they just want to say like, me and you made a song, it's 50-50. You know what I mean? Like, handshake agreement, we're good to go, you know? But then you start to involve all these other parties and it gets really complicated. So what I find interesting about this experiment is going back to your early philosophy around like making products that are simple for people to use. I feel like it was your background in product design kind of highlighting some of the inefficiencies with music, which I think was the first time that at least I saw within like the on-chain music space, someone being like, I'm going to use the tools that are on the table, in this case, Foundation, which was like this emerging creator platform, to point out something that could be fixed in the music industry, and do that through the sale of an asset, which honestly empowered you to then go use those funds to market the song or whatever you did with it. But it was a very like specific moment in time that I think went beyond the song itself to actually talk more about the industry in general.
Definitely. Yeah. And then because of this one, actually, could you go to the collector one? Then it was just this thing of like, all right, with anything related to NFTs and music, what does the product side look like for that? And so this was just one that I mocked up where I showed what it could be like if within the song credits on Spotify, if you could see the collectors within it. And so little things like this, I love doing this because, it doesn't exist, but it's a what if, and what ifs are fun to design around. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, if we go to, I know we have one of your songs, In the Leaves, pulled up here, which has been my favorite song of yours so far, and just an amazing release. If you scroll down to the audience section here, it's interesting to see that on-chain music's kind of like presenting these ideas in new ways. And I know that obviously you mentioned that you started releasing quote unquote art on-chain prior to sound even coming around in the first place. Can you talk a little bit more about your journey with like releasing music on sound here, and kind of like what that felt like as an artist who is now developing their artist project as a whole?
Yeah. So let's see. The first one was on Foundation. And with that one, I broke apart the song ownership of it. And I will say my biggest learning within all of this, I kept feeling like I had to raise the bar of whatever I was dropping and like give so much. Yeah. And that people would want like the data of it, or the ability to make a song with me, or just like any experience that I could give them. And I was actually wrong about that. And really, people want to be part of a community, and they want to be close to the art and the artist. And so that's been my biggest learning lesson from doing the beginning drops on Foundation to all the drops on Sound. It's more about that community and even letting them meet each other. That it's not just like this one-off experience, that it's more about the artist and then that small community around it, because you really don't get that anywhere else. Yeah.
It's so true. And I mean, even for like the song In the Leaves that we were just referring to there, I remember I heard this song on Spotify and I just loved the song so much that I was like, I need to collect this. You know, like it became something that I really wanted to collect because I knew the song was going to do great. I mean, even at the time of us speaking, I feel like it has multi-millions of plays on Spotify and counting. And I just had such like a strong feeling that this song was going to be so special that there became this innate reaction to me as a fan to be like, I want to get closer to this music, you know? And I don't think I had any intention to be like, I want to own the masters to this, or I don't own the publishing. It's just like, I just love this song and it's so special to me that I want to be able to have a deeper relationship with it. And I feel like it was being able to collect it on sound and knowing that there was only, 50 copies of it available that made it feel like it was a very rare and valuable moment to own.
Yeah, you've got a good ear.
Yeah.
And yeah, with this one, I mean, I've done drops in all different ways, like dropping before the song comes out. With this one, did the drop after the song comes out. Sometimes like the one with Daniel that was most recent, that was the day the song came out. I don't know that there's any perfect way of doing it. Sometimes I think it is kind of nice to drop afterwards because it gives it like a little boost after the fact. But then I think the song also has to do really well.
I'm remembering, didn't you tweet out something along the lines of like, music NFT sales lead to like Spotify editorial placements or something? Like, didn't you have like an interesting moment?
This is the one that made me think about that. Because I think it was either 2 or 3 weeks after In the Leaves had come out that the sound drop happened. And then, I mean, I'm obsessive with the data. More so like, it's just fun. When I have a free moment in the day, like I'm always opening up the Spotify artist app and seeing how things are. And I noticed that there was a spike after the sound drop. And I didn't have, like, there wasn't a TikTok that took off or like anything else that it could have been. So we wonder.
I love that. I mean, I'm just going to chalk it up to that, I think that that's the best way to think about it. Yeah. And I mean, it's very interesting because you mentioned that you just put out a song with Daniel Allen, that's doing incredibly well. One of my favorite songs, honestly. And you mentioned that today it actually had its largest streaming day since release.
Yes. So now we just need to continue that.
Yeah. And I find that one fascinating because we're looking at that here. I mean, you guys put this out on release day. You sold these copies Onchain and then the song came out. And it's just like, we're moving into this world where I feel like the music is a lot more mirrored to the traditional rollout than it used to be in the past. I feel like early on with sound, it was either the song came out on Chain and it never came out on Spotify, or the song was out on Spotify for a really long time and then it came out on sound, but it didn't feel like people were kind of doing this like same day, it's dropping on Chain and it's dropping on Spotify. And I'm curious to hear your reaction to how that's felt as just like a creative process.
I go back and forth on it, to be honest. Half of me loves it because it's like, it feels great that everything comes out at the same time. But the other half of me is like, there are only so many hours in a day to focus on the socials. Maybe there's like a music video with it, the drop of it. Like even a typical thing is to put out the song and then the music video 2 weeks later or a week later, like something that gives it more of a moment beyond that release day. And so I do think there's something to that, like, drip campaign, I guess you would say, in a marketing sense of having things more staggered out. But there also is more excitement around it coming out that first day.
Right.
So I don't know. I flip-flop on it. I think it's more so dependent on the song. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about your EP that you put out recently because it's an incredible project. And I know you had mentioned at the top of this podcast that you started by doing features and doing like top lines for other artists. How did it feel for you to be putting out your first like formal EP with you as the primary artist that was like fully your own music?
Good. And now I'm like, I need to do more of it. Yeah. So even right now, I'm trying to figure out what my next EP is. But yeah, I think this is going to be something that I have to continue to balance. Like, to be honest, everybody has warned me of this. They're like, you're going to get pinned as the featured artist. So you have to keep putting out original music and make sure that it doesn't tilt too much into the feature direction. And so, I mean, I feel like I've always been pretty selective about the features that I take on, but probably even more so right now. And one other thing that I have to focus on, like, aside from putting out more original stuff, I have to also show that I'm a producer. That's like a current personal hurdle that I'm trying to figure out. Because I'm a featured artist, I think the assumption is that if you're a featured vocalist that you don't produce as well. Whereas it's like, I mean, there's a reason it all sounds the same of like what I'm making, because I produce on all of it, but I also bring other people into it. And, I always want to give them credit, but then how do I show that, like, so normally the flow with this is that I'll produce out all the demos and then I'll pass it between friends and make it the best song possible. Not all the same producers end up being on the songs. But then, you know, it's like, I just want it to be the best song possible. So there is the ego side where it's like, well, maybe I should just produce out everything by myself so that people know it's just me. Then it's like, well, my goal is to make the best songs possible. And if someone else brings in a better idea to it, I want that to be in the song. So I think I want to keep that flow of it, but I need to figure out how to just show that I'm producing on everything that I put out. Even some feature stuff I produce on it. Not I Just Need, but some other ones. I wish I produced on I Just Need. That one's so good.
I mean, it kind of goes back to your philosophy around like product design. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where there's almost this intention to like create the most elegant product possible. And a lot of time that requires collaboration. And like selfishly, you could just like make the whole thing and really stand on this ledge of saying like, hey, I did everything from front to back. But I feel like you're almost sacrificing some of your personal ego to put the best product into the world.
Definitely. Yeah. And so right now my plan is that I just need to make more content of me and Ableton so that it's a little more clear. But yeah, so this is something that I'm currently thinking through of like, yes, it feels good to put out original music, but how do I show myself even more, I guess, in the DAW?
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting because I feel like in a lot of ways, it's almost like a sign of the times where artists need to like prove that they're an artist, which is really weird to me. You know, like I feel like before it was just like, this song was good or it was not good. Now it's like, not only is this song good or not good, but who is this artist on TikTok and like, who is their personality and everything like that. And I would say one thing that I've come to really appreciate about you is that you actually are one of the most active artists in their collector chats of anyone that's in the Onchain music space, you know? And when you started that collector chat, I would just see you in there talking all the time. And it's back to like, probably you coming from like a small town if I'm having to connect the dots or something, but I feel like there's so much intention from you DMing people on SoundCloud when they like their song. But that really goes such a long way in my book, which is to say that the music's incredible. That's first and foremost the most important thing. But I think I've just noticed that you give so much time and energy to your supporters that I feel like it's really cementing this very strong foundation that I think is very noticeable.
Okay, I love that. And actually, I'm really glad that you said that because I always want to be more present in the chats. Like I personally struggle with responding to texts and being on top of that. But I have been trying to be active in the collector chat. And I will say there's something really cool about it because like as opposed to posting to TikTok or Insta, it's like, you know, these people want to hear whatever you're going to send to them. Whereas like if I post a demo on Insta, I mean, I even posted one today and I'm like, is it good enough to post there? But then I posted in the Telegram group as well and I didn't have that second thought about it. And so it actually is really nice having a space where you just know there are the best intentions around it. And the other thing is that music is incredibly lonely. I think people always make it look more social than it is on socials. Kind of by design of it. But it's mainly just like you in your apartment, little humble studio by yourself.
Right.
And so it is nice having another group where, yeah, it's like you can just plug in there at least once a day and feel tapped into some community.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like going back to your startup mindset around it, your Onchain catalog has been extremely intentional. I mean, in thinking back to your first releases on sound to some of the recent experiments you've run, I feel like every release you put out, you've put so much thought into what that's going to look like that it's really stood the test of time of like these early pieces that you've had on Chain, feeling like they have such significance because there was such a curated rollout that went into them. I mean, there was one that you did a campaign for, you know, cancer research and whatnot. There was obviously the one with song contracts. I don't know if you want to highlight any of those in particular, but I'd love to hear more about how you think about the releases you put on Chain and sort of the intention that goes into them.
Yeah, which just kind of goes back a little bit to what we were talking about before of like, so I want every drop to feel special. At the same time, there is that like ever-raising bar around it where I'm always trying to find the balance between that because I can't forever raise the bar. But even just doing little things like around the Easter egg, I really like that as an idea. Like, okay, so one song I did dropped on sound is called Hold Me, and in the cover art, there was a blanket that was used. And so for the person that won the golden egg, I bought them the same blanket and sent it to them. Or even Head Above with Rio, like that song is about trying to keep your head above water. And so with that one, both the Easter egg winner and then like raffled off 4 more, gave them a really nice candle and mailed it to them. So things like that I like doing. It actually makes me more excited about the drops. But it's always dependent on the song and like what meaning you can take out of it and how that could actually be a cool experience for someone.
Yeah, and I love those examples because none of those required like custom development work. You know, I feel like there's kind of this feeling out there in the community right now, which I think is a lot of merit to it, that in order to keep evolving and growing as an artist on chain, you need to be building more. You need to be allocating more time towards developing an artist website or doing like a custom smart contract or something like that. And what I responded to that is, well, I think that there's a lot of value in growing your presence on chain by building product. Everything you just mentioned is like you just bought someone a blanket, you bought some people some candles, and it's just like spending time with those collectors. And I think that as someone who collects a lot, when an artist goes out of their way to recognize you, that's something that you don't forget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you don't have to overcomplicate it. Also, I don't have a website.
Yeah.
If I did, I think it would be more of a like design exercise of what do I want my website to look like. I don't know that anyone will go to it. It's like Linktree and other things like that serve the purpose. So if you're going to dedicate time towards building, it has to be for something more than just building.
Right.
Yeah. Because I think this is where it's actually like a little bit more of imposter syndrome that I would see that falling into, where maybe someone feels like they have to be technical and they have to be a product builder. And so they think they're doing the right thing by making it more tech related, whereas you might not have to. Like I know startups that have raised a lot of money that it's manual until it works, until it, proves out that it's worth building a product around. Yeah.
Exactly right. I mean, it goes back to what you said earlier about do things that don't scale, And I think in a lot of ways, as people release more music on chain, they want to get crazier about what they're doing with it or have larger collections or try and do more ETH, etc. I just think it's really important to say that, like, I actually feel like doubling down on the people who are currently here and are still supporting you in the absence of having a financial expectation from you. Focusing on that is in a lot of ways more valuable than trying to grow the size of your audience, because inherently the more that your audience grows, the less it's going to be able to do those kind of like one-off experiments where you're DMing everyone or you're saying hi to people or you're buying them candles or whatever it is. So I don't know. I just think there's a lot of value in saying that you've come such a far way with your on-chain catalog and doing things that feel very manual. And I think it's really fascinating to hear from someone who has such a tech product design background that you haven't felt like you need to build product to expand your on-chain presence, because I think that's very validating to other people that are listening to this, that you don't need a custom website and a custom smart contract to go building your collector base,
It's like you need to grow something, but you don't need to be building unless it makes sense towards growing.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good way of saying it. And I'd love to maybe shift gears for a second into talking about just like product and Web3 more broadly. I think you're someone that has such an interesting perspective on that. How do you view the current state of consumer products on chain today?
Conflicted. I think it depends. It's like, are they mapped around a core use case or not? I think we saw a lot of bloat. And even like a reframing and branding within Web3, right? Like NFTs are cringe. At the core of it, I loved what they could represent as a place to experiment with your art. But then you saw a lot of people doing drops that were more of a money grab situation. And more so of like, I can't think of any examples right now, but like big celebrities coming in the space and then leaving, and, kind of like sketchy situations around it. And so it just has such a negative connotation around it. Right. And so I still see people building cool things. It just really comes back to like, are they building something that is a people problem and that people want? Because I think for a while we saw that kind of in the same way that people are building AI companies right now just to build AI companies, like people are building Web3 companies just because it was hot and the market was really good.
100% right. Yeah. I feel like we're very much lacking the core reason and intention behind why you need to collect something in the absence of there being a market behind it. I think that a lot of the success that came out of this industry was you buy something for $100 and you sell it for $1,000. But now that we're at a space where you're buying things for $5 and there's not an opportunity to sell it for $20, A lot of people are just like, why am I buying this thing in the first place? Which I find very interesting because we existed in this world we do with music traditionally where fans don't expect to make money when they buy a t-shirt, when they buy a concert ticket, when they pay for a Spotify subscription. Maybe there's a small segment that has that intention, but I think what I'm excited about getting to with on-chain music is there will always be the potential for a market. And I think that's one of the biggest unlocks with technology, but that shouldn't be the core reason why you buy something in the first place. I think we need to focus more on the social layer and the interaction layer around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you said that perfectly. I agree.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just I really enjoy getting your perspective on it because as someone who's built so many products in the quote unquote Web 2 world, I don't like using that phrase. And then someone who kind of consulted on these other companies, I'm very curious to hear, like, where do you think this goes over the next like year or two, or what's kind of your trajectory on the space as a whole?
Man, that's the golden question. To be honest, I don't know. I don't feel that different from it now than I did a few months ago. But I think that was more so seeing crypto firsthand and riding that wave and becoming desensitized to it. And then I felt the same way about NFTs. Like even at the height of it, at the time that I did that contract, like I was very realistic and excited about it. And I remember I was tweeting things like, even if NFTs in their current form fail, like this is still cool because we're experimenting with it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, like it was just this very hypey thing. So in a way, it's kind of cooler right now because the people that want to be part of it, like either from the collector side, I think it's awesome because they just want to be close to the art. And for the artists and the founders that are making stuff within it, there's probably a better chance that they're making things that are actually going to, have grounds to stand on. Yeah.
I think that's been the biggest challenge for me as someone that's constantly looking to curate good music on chain is just like explaining the why and trying to like really make that obvious, I think if I spend enough time with someone, it becomes clear over time that there's a very dedicated set of artists that are here participating. There's a very clear intention about where the space goes. But from the outside looking in, it is not obvious why it means something to be a part of this space right now. It's not obvious why you should be minting your music on a platform like Sound or why you should have a collector chat or anything like that. So I think the biggest gap that we need to solve as a collective industry is just like, why does it matter to be here in the first place? And what are the playbooks and the case studies that we can look to be like, oh, that artist really did something special and unique with their career. That wasn't just about the financial aspect of it, but they developed an audience and a fan base that allowed them to sell out a venue or be able to go on tour or do something that artists traditionally want. Because right now I think there's a big disconnect from the energy that goes into building a following on TikTok and Instagram and the energy that goes into building a collector base on chain. And I think in an ideal world, those two energy allocations are basically the same thing, which is to say you just want to find people who love your music. And I think if we can show that collecting on chain is a very concrete way of doing that with people who really care about your work, I think that's going to be the thing that allows artists to feel more inclined to participate naturally versus today where it feels like you should do this and someone's going to take a leap of faith. I think in an ideal world, people just want to do it because they just find it fun, exciting, and like culturally relevant, which I don't think is the case today.
Mm-hmm. And if I had to guess, I think the thing that has the most potential around it right now is more so this like VIP isn't the right term for it because it feels like kind of elitist, but having a special group where you give them energy and time and get to share stuff with them, I think that's the most promising thing within it. And I think if an artist can grow and bring those people with them, that will be the coolest experience. 100%. That's going to take time, but yeah.
I fully
like imagine if, right now an artist has a collector chat, and so they're able to talk personally with those 30 people in it. And that over the next year, they're blowing up and they're playing Coachella. And like maybe they get to bring these people along for that. Artist passes or like, I don't want to promise for anyone out there, but like, can you imagine that experience?
Totally.
Yeah.
It's really gratifying because I think that in so many ways we're trying to build the on-chain space to be the next form of like a viral TikTok, a viral moment. But I think there's something so powerful, and I agree with you that the term VIP feels elitist, but just kind of sticking to this super fan mentality, right? Of like, we don't need to build this space for millions or billions of people. That's what everything else is for. Like this space is meant to be for those core, like 100,000 people that really want to show up every day. And I think if we can, as a collective community, really just zoom in on products and communities and intention that supports that, I think that's going to be the thing that carries the space for it.
Definitely. And in a way, it kind of feels similar to things like Patreon that already exist. Yeah. Just like having a more narrow, music focus to it. And what I do see is that a lot of the people that are collecting are also fellow musicians. And actually, like, this is, in a way, it's a great educational resource. If you buy an NFT of an artist and now you're in their collector chat and then they put the stems of that song in there and now you get to deconstruct this song that you like and it speeds up your learnings around production. Like, in a way, it can be thought of, as an educational resource.
Totally.
So I think there are so many different use cases within it, but that's one where, like, personally, I can identify with that. Right. Yeah.
And I think the difference between something like Patreon, at least in my mind, is that there's a lot more composability between your different communities, I think with Patreon, it's very much like, this is my relationship with this one artist. I think with Onchain Music, it's more about, this is my relationship with all of these artists and all of these collectors. And what I'm hoping we can get to is a world where your collection is able to be more of like a social identity that you're able to wear and make meaningful connections with. I feel like right now there's not a great way for you to be able to use that collection of yours to make a new friend online. But if we can start to focus more on like, okay, I noticed that we happen to be in these 5 collector chats together. I happen to notice that we all collected these 6 songs together, and then finding better ways to like just start conversation around it. I think that's where it starts to get a little bit different from Patreon. But, as far as like ending this podcast on like the product note, I think the area that I'm excited to see people explore is more of the on-chain connections. It's just like, who are the people that you gravitate most towards online? How does that let you actually make a meaningful friendship? And then how does that actually lead to an experience, like you said, with you being able to go to Coachella, but based on the fact that you made 100 new friends because you just happened to be in the same collector chats together.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say, speaking for me as a collector and not an artist, again, because I've collected other people's drops within the space, is I've made a lot of friends through it. Yeah. And that wasn't the intention going into it. But, it finds people that are similar to you and that have a passion for music, and supporting the space and the tech side of it. And so they all blend together really well. And so there's something excited about, like being in the Loners Telegram group and just like seeing the messages come in, and it's like you always have that community there. Yeah.
Well, I think we need to appreciate it while it is the size that it is, because in my experience, what happens is people start to catch on and then you kind of lose that essence of what it meant to be a part of these niche communities so early on. So in a weird way, I'm thankful about where the space is today, because these really are like the, core groups of people that are going to really help carry us to the next chapter. But, I really appreciate your time coming on here. You shared such an amazing perspective. I'd love to hear if you have any closing thoughts or sentiments you'd like to share before we wrap up.
Ooh, I feel like I should end it on something, on a banger. Let's see.
No pressure at all.
Okay. One thing I guess I'll share, because I've had this in my, like, bouncing around my brain a lot lately, is we talked about me quitting my job to do music full time. I just want to say that if you are in a job right now and you're considering quitting for something, that doesn't have to be the first move. Like, you can, and I think I need to do a better job of like helping other people understand this, because I've just talked with so many people recently where they're asking me if they should quit their job. And it's like, well, put out music first. Like, let's get it going. But just to give the realistic perspective that if there's something you want to do and eventually you want to quit your job for it, you can start doing that now. It just requires setting down a little more boundaries in your current full-time job, and that you can completely get to that point. But which I feel like a parent in this advice that I'm giving, I meant this to be more inspirational, but just the realistic perspective that like, first, you should absolutely do it. Because why not? If you're gonna regret it in 10 years, that's an automatic yes that you should be doing it right now. But that you don't need to quit your job immediately. And sometimes I think that can help you transition better into it. Right. Yeah.
I love that. And I feel like it's so good for people to hear in this episode specifically, because it's a rough market out there. I'm sure a lot of people are struggling in general, but to your point, it's like, you don't have to go deep dive off, the deep end today just to be able to focus on something that you love. So I'm extremely excited about the future of your artist career. It's the reason why I wanted to have you on today. I feel like you're in such a special moment where I just have such a strong feeling that the next couple of years are going to be quite a roller coaster for you in like the healthiest sense possible. So I'm very thankful you took some time to talk to us, and I'm glad you're able to make it happen.
Thank you. This is great.
Yeah. And I guess closing thoughts, where can people stay up with your music if they want to listen to it? Where can they follow you on socials?
Yeah, I'd say socials probably best are Twitter and Insta. TikTok if you want the unhinged version of me. If you own one of my NFTs, you should join my Telegram group. It's quite small. I don't really post about it that much, so just DM me and I'll send you a link. And then music, I mean, you can listen to things on Sound, also Spotify. I still like driving people to Spotify because then I'm like, let's juice the algorithm, let's push this out to more people. So, you know, all those places.
I love it. Well, thank you very much for your time, Lyrah. It was a pleasure to have you on, and we will see you guys again next week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
I just need